We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Rick Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode.
Welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast. I'm Rick Allport and beside me is Mackenzie Cross. Today we're exploring the latest news that reveals both the challenges and triumphs in the fight for animal rights and veganism.
From heartbreaking footage of animal testing to the wonderful news that greyhound racing is set to be banned in New Zealand. We'll also be highlighting how plant-based diets are showing promise in preventing diseases, debunk myths about vegan meat alternatives with Viva's new guide, and dive into creative projects like the Vegan Dictionary, making veganism more accessible to all.
Today's episode will inform, inspire, and challenge us to keep pushing for change. Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Our first story is absolutely gut-wrenching. New footage has surfaced from Marshall Bioresources in New York, a facility confining up to 22,000 dogs, mostly beagles, bred specifically for animal experimentation. This footage shared by Peter shows a beagle puppy struggling in a tight-fitting inhalation mask trained to inhale toxic substances.
It's horrifying, Rick. These dogs are subjected to unimaginable cruelty long before they even reach laboratories. Marshall Bioresources also breeds ferrets, cats, and pigs, keeping them in filthy, overcrowded cages. Federal inspectors have cited them for multiple animal welfare violations, including failing to provide adequate veterinary care.
What's even more outrageous is that Marshall charges extra for dogs they claim are trained to wear these masks. In reality, the dogs experience what Peter describes as learned hopelessness, eventually giving up after failing to remove the masks. It's a sickening example of profit-driven exploitation.
This isn't just unethical, it's bad science. According to the NIH, 95% of animal tests fail to translate to humans. Despite spending $12 billion annually on these tests, the results rarely lead to effective treatments. Modern animal-free alternatives like organ-on-a-chip technology offer far more reliable and humane results.
And yet companies and universities continue to buy animals from facilities like Marshall. Peter is urging these organizations to cut ties and adopt superior, cruelty-free research methods. Animal retailers like Petco and Chewy.com are also being called out for supporting Marshall through their partnership with Marshall Pet Products.
The scale of this abuse is staggering, with about 44,000 dogs used in experiments annually in the US. It's long past time to end this archaic and inhumane practice. Progress is being made with modern testing methods, but we need to demand faster action.
For anyone listening, please consider supporting anti-vivisection campaigns and pushing for legislation that prioritizes ethical testing that does not involve animals.
Thanks for that good reminder, Rick. It's heartbreaking, but it's also a call to action. Together, we can push for an end to animal testing and a future where no animal suffers for science.
Now to Perth, where Tash Peterson, one of Australia's most prominent animal rights activists, was the victim of two separate attacks, both occurring within the span of an hour.
The first incident happened while Tash was filming her partner, Jack Higgs, outside a McDonald's to raise awareness about animal exploitation. A teenage girl threw a drink at Tash from behind and ran away.
It didn't end there. Just an hour later, while dining at a vegan restaurant, Lord of the Fries, Tash was approached by another woman who shouted her name, threw a drink at her, and then attacked her outside the restaurant. Tash was pinned to the ground by several people while trying to defend herself.
Jack intervened to protect her and ended up being punched in the head. He had to go to the hospital for tests due to blurry vision and a severe headache.
What's heartbreaking is that these weren't random acts. They were deliberate attacks aimed at silencing Tasha's activism. As Tash herself said, these actions are an attempt to suppress the truth about speciesism and the exploitation of non-human beings.
And it begs the question, why are people so angry at those who advocate for the rights of animals? The vitriol Tash faces reflects just how deeply ingrained animal exploitation is in our society.
Police are investigating both incidents, and there's hope that CCTV footage from the second attack will lead to accountability. Our thoughts are with Tash and Jack, and we commend their resilience in the face of such hostility. Let's talk about a troubling development in Indonesia, the introduction of fish milk. This powdered milk substitute, reported by Plant-Based News, is being promoted as a solution to the country's milk shortage, but it raises serious ethical and environmental concerns.
The concept involves processing fish into a flavoured powder that supposedly tastes like normal milk. While it's intended to meet rising demand for milk, critics, including the Jakarta Post, argue it's more of a political distraction than a meaningful solution. Proven strategies like fortifying staple foods and diversifying school meals would be far more effective and ethical.
Exactly. Fish milk is highly processed, masks its base with sugar and flavouring, and relies on exploiting sentient beings. Fish are capable of feeling pain and emotion, yet trillions are killed yearly for human consumption.
Not to mention the environmental devastation of fish farming and overfishing. In contrast, plant-based milks are mainstream, sustainable, and do not exploit animals.
Let's address ag-gag laws, a critical issue combining public health, animal welfare, and freedom of speech. A recent report in The Conversation reveals how these laws shield factory farms and silence whistleblowers, worsening risks for everybody.
Recently, a teenager in British Columbia became critically ill with H5N1, a deadly bird flu strain. Factory farms where animals are kept in cramped, unsanitary conditions are breeding grounds for such zoonotic diseases.
And here's the irony. Ag-gag laws passed in provinces like Alberta and Ontario are justified under biosecurity, yet there's no evidence whistleblowers spread diseases. Instead, these laws prevent the public from seeing the horrific abuse inside these facilities, like the illegal mutilation of pigs exposed by a worker in Ontario.
It's outrageous. While whistleblowers face penalties, factory farms get a slap on the wrist. Beyond the cruelty, these facilities pollute air and water, exacerbate climate change, and create conditions for pandemics.
Silencing whistleblowers doesn't protect animals, workers, or public health. It protects an industry built on cruelty. Research shows that public outrage from undercover footage drives calls for tougher regulations, which is exactly what the industry wants to suppress.
The solution isn't criminalising whistleblowers. It's ending the use of animals in our food system and adopting humane, sustainable, plant-focused alternatives.
Let's talk about a case that's as infuriating as it is heartbreaking. Ronald Greentree, a wealthy New South Wales farmer, was fined a record $1 million for illegally clearing 1,262 hectares of critical habitat, including land home to koalas and 30 other threatened species.
This wasn't a one-time mistake, Rick. Over 3 years, Greentree wiped out an area larger than Sydney Airport to build a private airstrip and expand his operations. He showed no remorse and didn't even accept the criminality of his actions.
Exactly. The court noted his complete lack of contrition, and with prior convictions for similar offences, it's clear he feels untouchable. A $1 million fine might sound substantial, but for someone like Greentree, it's pocket change, and he's still profiting while the environment pays the price.
Let's not forget what's been lost. Habitat for species like koalas, glossy black cockatoos, and endangered plants. This isn't just a crime against wildlife, it's an assault on Australia's biodiversity and future.
And that's why fines aren't enough. Environmental destruction on this scale demands harsher penalties, including jail time. Without stronger deterrence, we'll keep seeing people like Greentree destroy ecosystems for personal gain.
Absolutely, Rick. This case is a wake-up call to demand stricter environmental protections and real accountability. Koalas and countless other species depend on it.
Now to a truly horrifying case from Cheltenham, South Australia, where a couple received suspended sentences for starving 3 dogs, leaving one so emancipated he was near death. The RSPCA has called this one of the most severe cases they've ever seen.
It's heartbreaking, Rick. Woodstock, a 2-year-old Staffordshire Terrier cross, weighed only 12 grams and had a body condition score of 1 out of 9. The RSPCA inspector described him as the coldest living mammal he had ever felt. 2 other dogs, Spike and Lily, were also severely underweight and flea infested.
The conditions were appalling. The dogs had no proper shelter, and Woodstock was found barely alive inside the house in squalor. Without immediate veterinary intervention, they would have died within hours or days.
Despite pleading guilty, the couple's 6-month sentences were reduced to 4 months and then suspended entirely on an 18-month good behaviour bond. Magistrate Mark Semmons called it the most serious dog matter he'd seen in 35 years, but the punishment doesn't reflect the severity.
These dogs suffered immensely, and a suspended sentence sends a weak message about the consequences of such extreme cruelty. The people deserved a very lengthy stay in jail. The justice system must come down much harder on animal abusers.
The silver lining is that Woodstock, Spike and Lily have recovered and been adopted into loving homes. Their resilience is inspiring, but stricter laws are essential to prevent cases like this from happening again.
Absolutely. If you see animal abuse, report it immediately. Let's push for real accountability to ensure justice for animals like Woodstock.
Let's dive into some fascinating and hopeful news about the role of plant-based diets in cancer prevention. Recent studies from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and Flinders University have highlighted how dietary choices can significantly impact the risk and progression of certain cancers.
The study focused on multiple myeloma, a blood cancer that often develops from precursor conditions. Participants with elevated BMI followed a 12-week high-fiber plant-based diet, emphasizing fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. The results were remarkable. Not only did they improve their overall health and lose weight, but none of them progressed to multiple myeloma after a year.
The lead researcher, Dr. Urvi Shah, emphasized how a plant-based diet strengthens the microbiome and metabolism, building a stronger immune system. It's empowering to think that nutrition can play such a pivotal role in our health.
Meanwhile, Flinders University's research focused on gastrointestinal cancers, which account for 25% of cancer cases globally. They found that diets high in red and processed meats, refined grains, and sugary foods increase the risk of GI cancers, while diets rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and even healthy fats like those from nuts and seeds offered significant protection. The researchers also stressed the importance of limiting alcohol and sugary beverages.
These findings align with recommendations from organizations like the World Cancer Research Fund, which advocate for plant-based eating as a preventative measure. For anyone listening, this is yet another reason to consider becoming vegan. This lifestyle not only supports animal rights, but promotes health and is more environmentally friendly.
Here's some uplifting news from Malindi, Kenya. The Thrive Africa Vegan Women's Initiative has launched the Thrive Africa Plant-Powered Holidays campaign to promote plant-based diets rooted in African heritage. Running through early January, the campaign celebrates compassion, sustainability, and health during the festive season.
It's a brilliant initiative, Rick. By sharing plant-based recipes and cultural narratives, the campaign highlights how traditional African diets, rich in vegetables, fruits, seeds, and legumes, can combat lifestyle diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and cancer.
Advocates like Virginia Riguru emphasize that this is more than a dietary shift. It's a return to ancestral traditions. She also notes the environmental benefits, pointing out how plant-based foods reduce greenhouse gas emissions and are more sustainable and affordable than animal products.
This initiative is a shining example of how plant-based living can celebrate heritage, improve health, and protect the planet. It's inspiring to see Africa leading the way.
Here's an innovative story for you. This Is Not Game, a company behind the vegan card game Plants Against Veganity, is set to launch the Vegan Dictionary. just in time for Veganuary 2025. Co-written by vegan activist and entrepreneur Rory Cockshaw and his sister Anwen, this book aims to make veganism more accessible to everyone.
It's such a brilliant idea. Rory explained that veganism has its own vocabulary and even slang, which can be overwhelming for newcomers and their friends or family. The Vegan Dictionary is designed to be a comprehensive guide for anyone curious about veganism, and it's packed with useful information for seasoned vegans too.
The dictionary covers a wide range of topics, from animal behavior and health to agriculture and philosophy. It's truly a one-stop reference for understanding veganism.
And the inspiration behind it is interesting. Players of Plants Against Veganity told Rory that their non-vegan friends didn't always get the game's jokes or references. This book bridges that knowledge gap while making veganism more approachable.
Plus, the Cockshaw siblings worked with the vegan graphic designer Akos Sigga to ensure the book is visually appealing. It's available for pre-order now and officially launches in January. Let's tackle a topic that's been hotly debated: alternative proteins, or what some call fake meat. Animal advocacy group Viva has released a new guide, Fake News About Fake Meat, to debunk common myths and highlight the many benefits of plant-based alternatives.
This guide couldn't come at a better time, Rick. The meat industry often criticizes plant-based products as being overly processed, but Viva points out that many common animal products like bacon, sausages, and salami are ultra-processed foods. And let's not forget, these are classified as Group 1 carcinogens by the World Health Organization.
Exactly. The guide emphasizes that even low levels of processed meat consumption are linked to major health issues like cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, some of the biggest killers worldwide. Meanwhile, many plant-based products are not only healthier, but also more sustainable, and of course, cruelty-free.
Viva goes a step further by breaking down the nutritional content of vegan meat alternatives versus animal products. For example, some plant-based options like Linda McCartney Quarter Pounders have more protein and are lower in salt and fat compared to their animal-based counterparts.
That's a powerful counterpoint to the narrative that plant-based alternatives are nutritionally inferior.
This guide is a fantastic tool for anyone curious or skeptical of the health claims around vegan meat alternatives.
Let's finish today's episode on a win for greyhounds. New Zealand has finally announced an end to greyhound racing, but not until 2026. While it's a positive step, the decision to delay the ban for nearly 2 more years is hard to accept when we know the cruelty this industry inflicts on animals.
That's right, Rick. Racing Minister Winston Peters admitted that injury and death rates for greyhounds remain unacceptably high. This industry has had years to reform, with multiple reviews and warnings, yet it has constantly failed. Waiting until 2026 only prolongs the suffering.
And the response from Greyhound Racing New Zealand is tone-deaf. They're trying to position themselves as leaders in animal welfare, but the reality is clear. This is an industry built on exploiting, injuring, and discarding dogs for profit. Reforms, no matter how stringent, can't erase that.
The government's commitment to rehoming 3,000 greyhounds is a vital part of the transition, but it highlights the scale of harm caused by this industry. Every additional day of racing puts more dogs at risk, and it's hard to justify this phase-out period.
Though we can't be too critical, as New Zealand is miles ahead of Australia. The evidence is overwhelming. This is an inherently cruel and outdated practice. Ending it should be a priority everywhere.
Agreed, Rick. Let's hope this sets a precedent for other countries like Australia to ban greyhound racing now, not years down the line. It's time to put animal rights above outdated industries.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Vegan Compass podcast. Thanks for joining us as we explored the highs and lows of this week's news.
It's been a mix of heartbreaking stories and inspiring progress. From the resilience of animals like Woodstock the dog to the innovative campaigns empowering communities in Kenya, today reminded us why this fight is so important.
Absolutely, Mackenzie. Change can feel slow, like the timeline of the greyhound racing ban, but every action we take ripples outward and makes a difference.
To all the vegans and animal rights activists listening, don't give up. Every step forward, no matter how small, brings us closer to a world where animals are valued and protected. Your voice matters, your efforts matter, and together we're creating a kinder future.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this movement. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all the stories we've covered today.
Until next time, stay compassionate, stay informed, and keep that vegan compass pointing north.
Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
Be sure to follow us on social media at @thevegancompass_podcast. See you next time.